of 1998, Raccoon City was heavily affected by an outbreak of a new experiment that would be named the T-Virus, which would infect almost all of the inhabitants there and would see the release of horrific abominations, killing anyone in their path. During this event, a group of individuals would try and survive the things around them and would go on to discover that it was all thanks to the corporation known as the Umbrella Corporation. For one individual named Leon S. Kennedy, he would be deeply troubled by the events that he witnessed, as he was one of the remaining survivors and had to witness the utter destruction of this area by the US government. But things were not to stop there. Signing up to be a secret agent working for the US government, most likely by force, Leon would go through heavy military training that would almost kill him. But with that said, it enabled him to get his mind off of the past events he suffered within 1998. The year was now 2004, and sadly for Leon, things were about to get worse as he headed into the remote countryside within the heart of Spain, seeking out the US president's daughter, who had been mysteriously captured. Once again, Leon would witness a new horror as the villagers of this small village would try and kill him any way they could and would have clear infections all over their bodies. This infection would soon become known as Las Plagas, and on his travels would go on to discover that it was there all thanks to the cult known as Los Iluminados. So who are the Los Iluminados? How did they form? How was the parasite known as Las Plagas discovered, and what eventually happened to the cult? Well, in today's video we explore the events happening out within Spain, the main culprits of it, and the experiments they got up to. This is the story behind the terrifying cult of the Los Iluminados and the parasite known as Las Plagas from the incredible Resident Evil 4. It was the 18th century out within a rural region of Spain, and for a small village located within the land of the noble family of Salazar, everything seemed normal. However, on their everyday travels, most likely working as simple farmers, fishermen and handymen, a small group, a pagan cult more specifically, would go on to discover a horrifying yet alluring parasite that would go on to be named as Las Plagas. This triggered the group to go on to start worshipping this parasite, as they would name themselves as Los Iluminados, which would translate to the enlightened ones. With this new parasite they found, they would go on to force recruit others in their way of thinking, allowing the new cult to grow by the day. The enlightened ones would continue on in their goal to turn everyone within the Iberian Peninsula into their way of thinking, allowing them to accept the parasite of Las Plagas to become enlightened. Seeing this spread at some rapid pace, however, the first Castellan of the Salazar family took action and opposed the cult and took up arms to shut them down once and for all. Taking out the members of the enlightened cult, Salazar would take the parasite for himself and seal it down in the deep caves below his castle to make sure no one could use it for themselves ever again. Saying all that, another story was told about how this parasite was found, and that all links back to the Sadler family themselves. It was believed that in the year 1554, Adam Sadler was the first to find this parasite deep beneath the castle grounds. Here he says that he had finally found his faith. "Oh, behold, the divine vestiges left upon this world. It all begins here," he states when coming into contact with what would later be known as the Las Plagas. And with that would be the origin of the cult's creation, stating in their holy document that they praised the holy insect and that they were going to be promised paradise on earth. It was documented 200 years later by the next Sadler, Hester, that the cult had indeed been expelled from the area they originated from. As he would state, "We find ourselves in exile. Withered is the grass, barren are the trees. We wait in expiation. This isolated island our purgatory. Yet despair not, brothers and sisters, our time shall come." Centuries passed and the Salazar family was successful at removing both the parasite and the deadly cultists. The village was back to normal, and the parasite was sealed away from anyone wanting to use it for their cult's progression. This didn't last forever, as the 8th Salazar Castellan, Ramon Salazar, came into power, and thanks to the new leader of the still functioning Los Iluminados, Osmund Sadler, was convinced into joining the cult for himself, to venture into his family's castle, opening the seal of the chamber and retrieving the Plagas once again. The reason for why Ramon joined the cult was because he believed he was making making up for the wrongs and the sins that his ancestors had made during their time, and now under his rule he can make amends. With this new worldview of bringing the parasite back into the world, Ramon ordered his workers from the nearby village to start mining in the caves all around the castle to try and find where the parasite had been stored. With this, the cult also took over the castle for themselves and used it as their main headquarters. After months of digging all around the area, the Plagas was found once again, but it wasn't easy to get it to spread throughout the area, as the only version of the parasite they found was a fossilized remain of it. Despite that, the parasite was still alive. It had just been laying dormant for many years, waiting for an opportunity to thrive once again. This would not hinder the cultists' goal, as they would begin infecting everyone within the surrounding areas, starting with the workers. This would absolutely transform the workers into full-grown Las Plagas, which could be harvested to produce more parasites to enhance the spreading process even further. Sadler was eventually successful in spreading the parasite and allowing the Los Iluminados to gain full control over the area, giving his members full mutagenic powers that the parasite offered. Sadler himself took in a master version of the dominant species, which would allow him to have complete control over every other infected individual close to him, as well as those from great distances. On top of that, they would also give his loyal servants similar plagas to show their ranking status and to allow them to control all of the infected villagers below them. With all of that said, however, the villagers continued on as normal. However, after a while, they would abandon looking after their roles, allowing the crops to die out, as well as the cows being unfed and growing thin, leading to a mass famine by the 8th of December of that same year, with the villagers now having one goal, and that was to follow the rule of Sadler, attending cult services at their local church, as well as jumping to the defense against anyone who were to invade the area looking to cause trouble or shut down their operations. This led to the deaths of 30 people who starved, as well as 5 cows being slaughtered in the name of their cult, with more and more special individuals being chosen by the patriarchs, which reached 29 individuals in total by April. For Sadler, he would become known as Lord Sadler and would stay with the Los Iluminados headquarters of the castle, and his loyal members would perform dark rituals in Lord Sadler's name, as well as their religion. Sadler prior to this was in fact a bioorganic weapon researcher who lived in Spain prior to this event. Due to his expertise, his research was funded massively by an unspecified amount of wealth. It would be during this research where Sadler would go on to find Las Plagas fossilized within the mineral of amber deep in the cave system, and would go on to study the organism in great detail, realizing it had the potential of being turned into a new living specimen that would eventually become a valuable bioorganic weapon that he could manufacture in mass quantities and sell all across the world. But with this, he would need help, and thus formed the ancient cult of Los Iluminados that his ancestors once formed back in the day. This was easily done as he converted the mostly easily inspired Catholic inhabitants of the region to the cult and planted the parasite within all of them, turning them from simple villagers to humanoid creatures that would go on to be called ganado. His plan was now simple. With the help of this new bioweapon he had found and produced, Sadler's goal was to one day infect everyone on Earth with the parasite, which he could then go on to control, allowing him to rule over governments and be the ultimate leader of humankind, or human parasite kind, or whatever it is at this point. The first step of this plan was to capture arguably one of the most important leaders of the world's daughter, Ashley Graham, daughter of the US president during 2004. But to do this, he would need to hire the assistance of a highly experienced mercenary who was willing to do this for the cause. Prior to all of this, one man known as Jack Krauser, an ex-US Army veteran, would become highly jealous of his rookie Leon S. Kennedy, who was making a name for himself during his first encounter with a T-virus bioorganic weapon, which Krauser didn't fully believe in at the start. And on top of that, Leon had also become hired specifically by the President of the USA. On his mission named Operation Javier, Krauser would seek out a drug lord within South Africa named Javier Hidalgo, a mission that was so top secret even some of the highest ranking individuals within the US government didn't know of its existence. It was said in one story that when they came face to face with Hidalgo, Krauser would witness he was one of these BOWs he didn't believe in, and would see the true power of what he could become if he embraced these mutations. However, before anything could happen, Krauser would be impaled through the arm by this bioorganic weapon and would be forced forced into an early retirement. But now, with that new goal of embracing this new power that he had discovered from this drug lord, and as he quoted himself, the darkness awoke deep inside him. Another more secret document would tell of a different story during the events of Operation Javier, in which a group of elite special force soldiers was sent into the jungles, and during this a power struggle took place involving the US government, with all of the troops being taken out, all except one, that being Major Krauser. It was believed that the US government was behind all of the deaths as they refused to evacuate them from the area, and now that all of them had died, the government could cover it up, labeling Krauser as officially dead as well. One journalist would discover what truly happened during that operation and would write about it. However, like the soldiers, the US government dealt with the journalist and document once again to make sure that the words did not get out there about how inhumane the operation really was. Despite what truly happened out there, Krauser had now wanted more of that BOW power and needed it for himself. Here he would seek out a man known as Albert Wesker, a man who once worked as part of the Umbrella Corporation, but now worked for a rival corporation and knew how vital T-virus mutations were on the human body and how the mutations could benefit people. Finding Wesker, Krauser started working with him, researching bioweapons, and the two would locate the Los Iluminados out within Spain and would work on trying to infiltrate the cult worshipping their own unique bioweapon. Now aware of this cult, Krauser was sent out on a mission to retrieve the dominant species Plaga egg that could ultimately control all of the other Plagas around them, and with this power could rule over the world and essentially become the most powerful person out there in the world. Infiltrating their ranks, Krauser would meet with Osmund Sadler, who at first did not accept Krauser's help and did not trust that he was there to help boost the cult further. Because of this, Sadler set him out on his grand plan to capture the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, and bring her back to the cult, infecting her with the Plaga, to then send her back to the US to begin the spread of the Plaga parasite. Krauser was successful in his capture of Ashley, and with that became a true member of the Los Iluminados, earning the respect of Sadler to some extent. However, with that said, Krauser was still on the hunt for power and saw the potential within the cult itself and saw how truly powerful the dominant species Plaga egg was. After his first task with Sadler, Krauser was gifted with a sample of it as a gift and would go on to implant it in himself, betraying his initial mission. But this was what Krauser wanted. This Plaga gift allowed Krauser to gain enhanced speed and strength and transform his damaged arm into a heavily mutated blade, which also worked well as a shield against any bullet fire and essentially being indestructible. Despite still not fully trusting Krauser, Sadler was able to surround himself amongst a few other lieutenants who would go out and do his vital work for him. These were with Ramon Salazar and Bitorez Mendez, who would actively go around the areas spreading the word about the Los Iluminados and the parasite, and brought people into their way of thinking. Ramon, as mentioned previously, was the heir of the region, inheriting the castle and governance thanks to his family's history. Now at the age of 20, Salazar had become extremely impressionable and was easily converted by Sadler and his overall goal for power, meaning that Ramon was going against the actions of his ancestors who had first discovered the parasite. Even his own father was skeptical of his own son and his unstable mind. He would make sure that the housekeeper kept an eye on him and made sure he kept out of trouble. The housekeeper in their diary would go on to state that even she could see the evil temperament he housed within his younger years, as he would torture his servants utilizing acid that he would throw in their faces to simply just watch them suffer as a form of entertainment. Thanks to Ramon's efforts of mining the parasite and bringing it to the surface for Sadler's research and ambitions, Ramon was gifted with a dominant species Plaga, which allowed him to control his body, retaining his own form, and to control all of the lesser species around him, helping him become a commander of the forces around him in case anyone was to break into his castle to stop the cult's plans. But Ramon wasn't just reliant on the villagers to become part of his personal armed forces. Ramon would also go on to command a much stronger bio-organic weapon creature that would be named the Verdugo. The Verdugo, which translates to the Executioner, are 8-foot-tall human insect creatures that were created by the infusion of human and insect DNA controlled by the Plaga and sped up thanks to the infusion of the strange black liquid that was also found down below within the caves. Two of these Verdugos would be created as the insects, or what was labeled the sacred liquid lava were placed inside the wombs of chosen women. At first, this just created a new creature that was more bug-like than human, named the Novistador. However, 2 years later, the experiment changed a bit, as it looked at fusing human and insect together. With this, the housekeeper was to nominate herself for the experiment, and 1 year later, the first of the Verdugo was born and named Pasanta. But one was not enough for Ramon. 2 was ideal, and so he began experimenting once again. This time with one of his servants wanted to prove how loyal he was, and thus became the second Verdugo, named exactly that. Now born into existence, these creatures would have heavily plated natural body armor similar to that of arthropods that could resist all forms of gunfire but were weak to extreme cold and explosives. Most of the time, however, these creatures would wear red cloaks that could hide their monstrous faces and mutated bodies, making most believe they were just very tall individuals who would stand next to Ramon at all times as his own personal bodyguards. However, when those cloaks were to be removed, these giant terrifying creatures would be revealed, showing their full mutations of huge muscles, armored carapaces, and massive claws as their hands and feet, with a long barbed tail that could take out their enemies from a distance. On top of those 2 monstrosities, Ramon also housed another creature that was once a loyal servant to his family's name. This creature would be later known as the Garrador, but this individual used to be a torturer for the Salazar family, who had his whole family history follow the same path. His family did it, and his grandfather also. According to the caretaker of the castle, this one man housed so much hatred that he could tear down the whole world, who had an incredible talent at making others suffer. After a while, Ramon took him down into the dungeon and locked him away. However, this is not specified as to why. It was just down to the caretaker to now feed him on a regular basis. However, after many weeks of endless pained cries from down within the dungeon, the caretaker started losing his mind. Even when recalling his memories of it, does not want to remember what happened, and because of it, he left the castle for good, stating that it almost broke him. Now being infected with the parasite, this individual would be desperate for blood, willing to kill anyone who he could sense in his area. But luckily for anyone who found themselves down there, it seems Ramon at some point made him blind by sewing his eyes together, most likely leading to the sounds of those cries the caretaker hated hearing during his time there, and because of that cannot see anyone anymore, but he can hear you if you were to make any slight noise, and if he does, he will rip you to shreds. Bitorez Mendez, on the other hand, would not need any personal bodyguards, as his own unique mutations would allow him to work alone, with a bit of help from his infected villagers who he could also control. Originally, Father Bitorez Mendez was a well-educated Catholic priest, earning great respect throughout the village he lived in. Living within a much larger house than the rest of the villagers, Mendez lived in a very civilized manner, with his home being incredibly clean and tidy, spending a lot of his time within his small library that was filled with books that were mainly written in English. This was most likely so that he could learn the language or develop more knowledge about the writers and their traditions. The Mendez family was all about community spirit, encouraging a more simple life that looked at farming and agriculture, and really did not like the idea of modern technology taking over their lives, and because of this, the village and population thrived. For a time, Mendez himself hit back at anyone containing the parasite by isolating what he called the madness, setting fire to one man's home to isolate it from the village. However, this only continued for so long, and as the parasite spread further and faster, Mendez could not contain the madness spread any longer. As he had earned such great respect between him and the villagers over the years, when Mendez eventually converted to Los Iluminados, he was able to convince many around him to his way of life, making it incredibly easy and quick for all of the villagers to be converted to their ways and infected with the parasite. As a reward for his loyalty to the cult, Sadler also gifted Mendez with another one of the special parasites of the dominant species Plaga, or Master Plaga, which allowed him to control those lesser than him, but it also went on to give him increased strength and to transform into an irreversible mutation if he was ever threatened and forced to take dramatic action. With this mutation, Mendez's fingertips would grow into sharp spikes, his torso would be lengthened and split apart apart with small legs which would resemble an insect. His whole spine would sprout out, and on his back, almost scorpion-like features would emerge, with multiple other limbs spurting out, allowing him to become even more mobile on the ground and on ceilings, without having to use his human legs. On top of all of that, Mendez also had a fake eye, which would actually be used as a key to enter a castle within the village, which would use a retinal scanner at its gate. It was said that he voluntarily gave up his real eye in order to hold this secret key, which showed once again his true loyalty to the cause. With these lieutenants, Sadler would be able to focus on his goal of infecting Ashley Graham and sending her over to the US to begin his world domination. But not only did he have these infected lieutenants and villagers working for him, over on a remote island away from the mainland, Sadler would set up his main base of operations, where he would test all of the bioweapons he was making, as well as the origins of the parasite. On this base, he would assemble some of his most loyal believers and would house them there with major defenses to make sure his work could not be disturbed or shut down. Originally, the island consisted of just the Salazar fortress ruins, which included a prison. However, as more and more research went ahead and the bioweapons were made, new facilities were built across the island, with new labs and a communications tower on the west, with roads built to allow transport in and out. Underground would also be a waterway cavern, which would be used to accommodate a small ship that would go on to serve as Los Iluminados' navy. But the thing that was the most horrifying thing from this island was deep within the labs. Sadler had been actively experimenting on what it was like to insert Plaga inside individuals, trying to work out how to maximize the mutations to create some of the best bioweapons the world had ever seen. Here, Sadler and his team would insert multiple parasites into one human body to see how that affected the body. Because of this new test, the human bodies that were used as the test subjects would start mutating radically and were transformed into horrific monstrosities that would become known as Regeneradors. 7 feet tall creatures that were incredibly flexible, able to manipulate their muscles and tendons to attack their targets with vicious sharp teeth. But the most terrifying thing of all about these hulking grey experiments was that no matter how many times they were shot with a standard weapon or even an explosive, they could just regenerate back to their original form and continue on their hunt. The only way to take them out would be to pinpoint their mutations within their bodies and take them out that way. However, with that said, those mutations could mutate even further and turn them into Iron Maidens, the same looking creatures, however this time with spikes all over their bodies that would be used to impale their victims, and if they were to be killed once again, would fire them off in a last effort attempt to take their killers down with them. The plan for these creatures was to send them out into the wider society to help shape a new world with the parasites of the Las Plagas. With this, they were contained into cold storage and stored away within containment facilities and large body bags, waiting for the day they were to be deployed to take out their enemies and strengthen the parasite world. These creations were all helped made thanks to Dr. Luis Serra Navarro, who was once a former employee of the European Division 6 lab of the Umbrella Corporation, who worked on the Nemesis project. But after feeling disconnected by the ambitions of the corporation, he would set out into the world, only to be later recruited by Sadler when heading back to his home village of Valdelobos, in which he once lived with his grandfather. A lot of past memories of sad times happened within this village, such as the passing of his mother and seeking guidance from the local Catholic reverend at the time, that being Mendez, as well as witnessing his grandfather losing his mind as he was infected by a strangely vicious dog within the area. But now as an adult leaving Umbrella, he needed the work, and with it started working for Sadler and the Los Iluminados. But he was being manipulated by Sadler into believing what he was doing was for the greater good and part of their religion. But instead, he actually wanted him to make these bioweapons to use in his world domination plot. Being a part of the genetic research and modification team, Dr. Serra would be located on the private island facility, with his task being to find ways to weaken and or remove the Plaga from their hosts. What seemed like a positive task, Sadler's true reason for this was to work out what their weaknesses were, and once that was learnt, find a way to engineer a new generation of parasites that were resilient to these weaknesses and were near impossible to overcome. This was also encouraged by the head of the project, Anabel Garcia Asudero, as she would go on to infect all of the high-ranking researchers with the same parasite parasite, as she idolized Sadler and his ambitions at the time. During his research, Dr. Serra would be overwhelmed by what the mutations could do by injecting one or multiple in the body, and because of his experiments would go on to develop some of the horrors on the island and mainland, including the mentioned Regeneradors, as well as seeing the work that had been done with the Novistados and the Verdugo. It soon became apparent to Dr. Serra what Sadler's true intentions were for all of the experiments and what he planned to do on a grand scale, and he started to regret everything he had done during his time working for the Los Iluminados. Realizing he had full access to everything within his own lab, Dr. Serra would reach out to a friend he had met during his time at university, hoping he would assist him in his escape, knowing full well that the information he housed would put him in a valuable position. Unfortunately, that contact did not work out for him, but through it found some new help, this time from Ada Wong, who worked with a rival corporation alongside Dr. Albert Vesca, who had been looking to infiltrate this cult to gain its Plaga parasite and bioweapons, and also locate Krauser, who was originally sent there. Sadly for Dr. Serra, as the rival corporation started to infiltrate the cult, he would go on to be kidnapped by Bitorez Mendez forces whilst traveling through the village. But by this point, the US government had set up a task force which included the US president's loyal agent, Leon Kennedy, to get inside the village and save the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, from the cult's practices. It would be here where Leon would fight back against the hordes of infected villagers and monsters and witness the horrors Sadler had put upon the world. Working together with Dr. Serra, Leon saved him from where he was being kept prisoner, but in the process of being within the village would become infected himself thanks to Mendez once again. Dr. Serra knew exactly what could be done to save him from the parasite, as he had saved himself from the parasite back when he was first infected by his own boss, but it would be a long journey to do so, and for Leon, his main priority was to locate and save Ashley. On their mission, Dr. Serra would sadly lose his life as the two would come into contact with an old friend, Leon's once trainer, Jack Krauser, who would kill him in cold blood, but in his last breath would save Leon's life and hand him the key to his labs where he could free both him and Ashley from their parasite mutation that was quickly getting worse and susceptible to being controlled by Sadler himself. And once they were free from the parasite's control, they would be able to escape their clutches once and for all. Reaching the island, Leon would witness the horrors of the Plaga mutation and what they had been testing during their time there, and would finally come face to face with Sadler in a standoff with the help of Ada. Getting the better of Sadler in his heavily mutated form, Leon would go on to destroy the Plaga mutation, and soon after, the island facilities would start to go up in flames, wiping out all those who had been mutated by the dominant parasite. For Ashley and Leon, they would be safe and could return back home to the president, knowing that another biohazard disaster had been pushed back. However, with that said, a remaining piece of the amber had been recovered by Ada, who would originally start taking it back to her employer. Discovering that he had similar ambitions that triggered this whole event in the first place, Ada seemed like she had other ideas and were going to change the path she was on, hijacking the helicopter and flying the opposite direction, forcing Vesca to most likely have to grab the sample his own way. But now with the island without any real threat, that is more likely an easier task. For the cult of the Los Iluminados, their days were finally over. All of their residents infected by the Plaga had no more leader with the dominant species infection to rule them, and would just become corpses laying out on the wasteland. Their facilities where they housed their new bioweapons were fully destroyed, meaning the world was free from their harm. But the amber housing the parasite is still out there, and the threat of a new biohazard is always on the table, and for Vesca, he will do anything to get it and shut down all those who betrayed him. But until then, this has been the story behind the deadly mutated cult known as the Los Iluminados, as well as the parasite that started all of this, known as Las Plagas. I want to say a big thank you for watching this video. I know it's not the most in-depth look at Resident Evil, but I love the RE4 remake so much I wanted to make a video on it so badly. So a huge thank you for watching this, and a massive thank you to my patrons as well for allowing me to make these videos on a regular basis, including my small fishes, my big fishes, Christopher, Last Persona User, Arto Creme, Greg, and Anthony, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Fiery Italian, Ica the Wolf, Sith Lord 906, and Video Game Player 75, my Sharks Wow Such Gaming, Jason X117, Breadbeard and Ronda C, and my Megalodons, Sinus, Hazy Thoughts and Chernobyl Stalker. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching again, and if you want more lore videos, check out my playlist in the description below. Use my G Fuel link and code WiseFishYT for up to 30% off of your orders, and please do like, comment and subscribe to help get these videos out there. And with all of that said and me being completely out of breath, I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.